Okay, the following recording will go over P6 of DSR, the Double Dragon phase. For this, please make sure you have studied the toolbox just to have an idea of what's going to happen. But what's big about P6 is it's a big tank responsibility. Tanks need to have a very good uh, awareness of where they're positioning their bodies to resolve different kinds of busters and telegraphs that they have to resolve. The dragons telegraph what they're doing to the tanks, so the tanks do have to be vigilant and scan. The rest of the party just need to make sure that they're positioned accordingly to resolve the different mechanics that are happening. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at a normal POV that I recorded, the wide shot of the same pole for that respective POV, and we'll take a look at the tank perspective with a few notes. And as I've said in past videos, it's really key you study your mitigations because unfortunately this is another phase where you can be comfortable with your rotation, you could be comfortable with executing the mechanics, but none of that matters because uh it does matter to meet the damage check, but if you're not studied on mitigations, you'll likely drop dead at damage. There's no leeway in this phase, much as there's no leeway in transitions P3 and there's no leeway or not a lot of leeway actually in P7. So please study your mitigations. But with that said, we're gonna go ahead and let this VOD play out. We're in meteor sequence of P5, Death of the Heaven. Thornton has landed. He's going to prepare a raid wide, and he's going to do his tank buster sequence on the main threat. What's really important about the end of P5 going to P6 is it is possible in Dawn Trail to push Thornton quickly enough that you'll misalign your pot from your raid buffs. Your pots are off cooldown at this point, and on transition into the new map for P6, you're gonna pop your potions. But if you push Thornton way too early, as you can see, Thornton is sitting at 11% health. He's almost at the check. The risk of you pushing Thornton early is your 2 minutes do not come back on schedule to align with your pot. This is something that's gonna come back to haunt you in P7 as well. You need to make sure when you're going into your burst, um, you're aligning your pot accordingly so that you do enough damage to meet the check for P6 and P7. The risk of you misaligning your pot with your 2 minute on entry into P6 is your your 2 minute will come back during cauterize, very likely during cauterize, and a lot of that time is going to be wasted away while the dragons are untargetable and on north side ready to cleave on the respective side. So you do wanna see the tank buster that's about to hit the Dark Knight here in order to make sure your 2 minutes align with pots. Otherwise, you start running the risk of messing the timeline up during P6. Because during P6 you're gonna have you're gonna have two burst phases and a pot window and a burst phase on the pot window at the start of P6. So we're making sure that the buster is hitting the main threat. Most tanks will typically invuln. Some tank compositions may necessitate a swap. So the healers just have to be ready and the tanks have to pop their mitigations accordingly to prepare. But once you push Thornton past 3%, he collapses. Do not kill him. If you kill Thornton, you will fail P6 and you won't be able to move on to P7. So do not kill Thornton. Once he drops down to 3%, leave him alone. The party is gonna clump together on the south side, typically near 1, and the tanks are gonna hang north side, on biasing towards their respective dragons. So we can see here T2, which is the Dark Knight. is going to hit Pressfelger, who's gonna spawn towards biasing Charlie. T1, the Gunbreaker, is gonna hit Nidhogg, and bias Nidhogg is gonna spawn towards 3. The main note for tanks is find out if your cleave is the gain on 2. For Gunbreaker and Dark Knight, I believe, and I'm pretty sure their cleaves are gains on 2. Warrior and Paladin are not gains on 2. So, do with what you will with that information, position accordingly to maximize the amount of damage that you're able to do. But that's the initial positioning. So on transition into the map, we pot, and then we're gonna go into our 2-minute right at the start. So Nidhogg has spawned, Pressfelger has spawned. We do some pre-raid setup at the beginning. And the way the raid setup is in preparation for Wyrmsbreath I. I'm not gonna go over it because you should know this from the toolbox. But right now we're just waiting for Wyrmsbreath I to start casting. These tethers are gonna go out, so you have to position accordingly, direct the tethers, in order to soak both a fire and an ice uh, tether. If you take more than one of the same, you're gonna drop dead to damage. And then just a note, just a note for the positioning. You can stand on or biasing outward on the what I like to call the rails and what I called the rails in P3. Um, for the people who are on the biasing on the south side. So you can use this kind of general area as a reference to help your positioning. If you're on north side of the tethers that you're baiting, what you want to do is using the top border edge of the number 1 marker here, you want to sit on this top line. If you sit anywhere else, if you sit dead center on the marker, or if you sit on the south edge of this number 1 marker, you start running the risk of getting cleaved by the breaths that are going off, because the breaths go off as a cone. And as I'm trying to draw right here, very crudely, this cone coming from Pressfelger is just enough to cleave this bottom portion and the middle portion of the marker. So again, if you're needing to be north side, because you designated yourself as a flex on the pre-raid setup during P2, you want to hang out on top of the number 1 marker, biasing towards the middle. Do not sit in the middle, and do not deviate anywhere from this marker. And you'll be okay. Reason you don't want to deviate far from the marker is because at the same time that the non-tanks are resolving Wyrmsbreath I, and getting into position, the tanks are reading the mouths of the dragons. And depending on what the mouths of the dragons do, that will tell the tanks how to resolve their respective mechanic. If both mouths of the dragons are glowing, that means both tanks need a position such that the tanks are on top of each other, preferably in the center or biasing north side from center. Tanks need to be on top of each other in order to do a shared buster. If the tanks mess up the reading and fail the shared buster, each tank is going to get a light and a dark bleed, and very likely die as the encounter goes on. Now, if one of the dragon's mouths are glowing, and this is why P6 is a big responsibility for the tanks. For example, if Pressfelger's mouth is glowing, in this example, and Nidhogg's mouth, I'm sorry, if Nidhogg's mouth is glowing and Pressfelger's mouth is not glowing, what this means is T2 is gonna have to position away. You can, as T2 in this example, you can just like sit towards the yellow marker, obviously still hitting the boss. Their hitboxes are very big, and T1 kinda has to, like, hang out as far away from T2 as possible, because in this example that I laid out, if Nidhogg's mouth is glowing and Hrestvoger's mouth is not glowing, um, Nidhogg is going to target, T2 and hit T2 with a massive, like a very massive, plume that can easily kill T1 or the party if they're not positioned correctly. Uh, and the dragon whose mouth is not glowing is gonna do a conal, AoE down the center of the map. I believe it's called, Staggering Breath. So once again, for the north side non-tanks who are taking the tether bait, this is why you just wanna make sure you're at the border on the north side of one and not any further in, is because you wanna avoid getting hit by the conal, AoE that the dragon without the glowing mouth will do while the other dragon is, hitting, uh, one of the tanks for a baby buster. In this scenario, let's see what we got. I believe it's Restfelger, yeah. So, in this scenario, the non-tanks are positioning, and they're doing their tether stretching. For the non-tanks, you don't care what these dragons are doing. This is tank responsibility. So, your job as non-tank is stretch the tether, um, and make sure you soak only one fire and one ice. As long as you do that, you've done your job. You're good. The tanks have to flip their camera around while they're moving around to figure out, okay, what are the dragons doing? In this scenario, the Prestfelger mouth is glowing, and then Nidhogg's mouth is not glowing. So what this means is Nidhogg is gonna do a conal AoE down the center of the map. Nobody can be in the center, otherwise they will die. And Prestfelger is going to hit T1 with with um with a plume. So T1 is gonna have to position on the purple marker on the respective side. T2 is gonna have to make sure they're far away enough to outrange the blast radius of that buster hitting T1. So that's the setup for this scenario. I'm gonna let the bot play out because it was a lot of explanation. But once again, at the start of P6, we go into our 2 minute. The non-tanks don't care. They're just doing their tether thing. The tanks, however, are booking it and getting into position here. Pressvalker's gonna hit T1, the Gunbreaker, with a Buster. So right here, you can see T2, the Dark Knight's over here. T1 is over here near the purple marker, and we're about to see everything go off. So it's a lot of visual noise, unfortunately. But if we look at the wide shot POV, gonna skip around a bit, we'll have a better vantage point. So here, this is the same pull. We're going into 2 minute, we're going into Wyrmsbreath I, we're moving into position. And so, as I emphasized at the beginning, you need to look at if you're a tank, you need to look at the mouths of the dragons. We can clearly see that Hrestvoger's mouth is glowing, and Nidhogg's mouth is not glowing. So zooming out, once again, pay attention to T1's positioning. T1 is preparing to take a buster. That's going to have a very big radius, and T2 is just staying away so that they don't get killed by the buster. And the dragon whose mouth is not glowing, in this case Nidhogg, is going to cleave down the middle. So that's what's going to happen. I'm going to let this play. So here we go. And you can see possibly very faintly how big that buster is. It's massive. The radius of that buster going off is about yay big. It's pretty big. So here's T2. Here's the north side tether people. It's usually the melees unless there's some flexing going on. Yeah, you gotta be careful when you're positioning to take that buster. Okay. So as soon as we resolve Wyrmsbreath 1, the melees have to split off and make sure they're not overlapping. We're pre-positioning for Akh Afah I. What Nidhogg is going to do is he's going to target one random DPS and assign them a vow. The way the raid plan is set up and the way this phase plays out is very clean. The the there's a general order of doing the vow passes that I'll get into as we progress through the poll. But the important thing to know is, especially for the healers, the person who has vow will be taking dot damage. So as a healer, you have to make sure that this person doesn't drop dead. In order to avoid a scenario where, the person drops dead, the damage from the dot, the ticker is ticking down. If this debuff ticks down and is not passed successfully, uh, you enrage Nidhogg and you fail P6. Moreover, if this dot, um, when this dot expires that initiates the pass. If there's more than one person caught in the blast radius of the dot expiring, anyone who doesn't receive the dot, because it will only pass to one person, the people who do not receive the dot because they got caught in the radius, will suffer their HP is gonna get cut in half, and they're as good as dead in a lot of cases if we have to resolve Akh Afah or any other major mechanic that involves high damage. So right now the ninja has a dot on them. We've just done Wyrmsbreath 1 with our positioning. The DPS are spreading, they're not overlapping, just so we can see who's getting the assignment. We're pre-positioning for Akh Afah 1. The ninja is assigned Vow, so the ninja is going to have a dot. And we're currently getting into position to resolve Akh Afah. So the main things to keep in mind with Akh Afah is right now our POV is looking towards the south side, with Alpha being on the north side. Group 1 is gonna bias north. Group 2 is gonna bias south for Akh Afah, because Akh Afah is a cast that primarily targets healers. You stack on the healers. The stacking is a little tight. And at the end of the cast bar, the AoEs are gonna go off. The stacks are gonna go off. It's not enumeration, but you do need to make sure there are 4 bodies because it is high damage. Now, the other thing that you need to do during Akh Afah is it's a health check too. If these boys are more than 3% difference, it's like Hand of Pain of Alexander of D or A3S. If their HPs are too different, a tether will spawn as a visual cue to let you know, hey, you need to hit this dragon more, or you're gonna fail the damage check and you're gonna wipe it almost instant. You're guaranteed almost going to wipe P6. So right now Akh Afah is calculating. Group 1 and Group 2 are in position, and we're both hitting the dragons. We're hitting both dragons. Right now, Akh Afah is telling us that we need to hit Pressfelger. If you see a white tether, that's the signal. The white tether means you have to hit Pressfelger. If you see a purple tether, that's telling you you need to hit Nidhogg more. As long as you respect the 3% health disparity, you'll be okay for Akh Afah. Unfortunately, Akh Afah is very frustrating because, especially in the era of Dawntrail and especially with Pictomancer in tow, or even just having a black mate, or even sometimes a white mate, um, if you hit one of the dragons with a heavy hitting spell, you have to be very vigilant about which dragon you hit. Honestly, sometimes it's just safer to just do your 1, 2, 3 or your regular cast and not your heavy hitting attacks, because I've been in scenarios where my misery has crit direct hit, done enough damage to one of the dragons, and unfortunately push one of the dragons over the 3% threshold, and we all die. So I cannot understate it is important to plan your tools around Akh Afah to make sure you're not going too crazy on the dragons and kill everyone. In prog scenarios, some people may say hold damage, do not attack the dragons once they're even. I would I would discourage that. You have to keep hitting the dragons because later in the fight there are some configurations um that are going to have forced downtime for half the party. You have to keep hitting the you have to keep hitting the bosses during Akh Afah. So once again, we're in our group 1, group 2 positioning. We're keeping the dragons even while Akh Afah is um, calculating. As soon as Akh Afah finishes, both both groups are gonna get hit. We're being good people and making sure that the dragons are even. And as soon as Akh Afah is over, Pressfelger is gonna jump away. And here is when you start uh reading Pressfelger. Pressfelger is gonna do one of two things. He's either gonna have his head down, as we can see here, or he's either gonna crane his head up far enough that you can't see his face. With his head down, what this means is he's telegraphing that the party has to go far away, and the tanks have to be as close to Frestfelger as possible, because um, the closest people when Frestfelger's head is pointing down is the closest people are gonna bait two plumes, and they're really massive. As I'm trying to crudely draw here, I'll draw it in the wider POV. So that's how you read Frestfelger. Head down, party far, tanks close. Head up. Head up means party close, tanks far. At the same time, Nidhogg, as you can see here, is gonna spawn um is gonna spawn at the outskirt of the map, and Nidhogg is gonna prepare Cauterize. It's just a dive bomb. He's gonna cut through the map. So those are the two main things you need to look out for: is figure out where Nidhogg is so you don't get run over by him, and then figure out what Pressfolger's doing. So once again, in this scenario, it is party far, tanks close, because Frestfelger's head is pointing down. If we look at the wide POV, there's one more element at play that I do want to share that will be very helpful with positioning throughout P6. So if you look at the red and the blue markers right now, the red and the blue markers are set up such that, let's see if I can get a good vantage point. The red and blue markers are set up such that um, they cut the map into quarters very, very, very well. And of course, you can use the lines on the floor to help you. But this is helpful so that you can figure out where the safe spots are going to be and where the threshold is for the safe spot to keep you alive. Because in the scenario that we saw in the regular POV right now with Nidhogg, he's going to cleave through Pressfelger, and Pressfelger's head is down, so it's party far, tanks close. The positioning that you're going to have to do is such that, going over to the YPOV, Nidhogg is over here, and then let's just pretend Pressfelger's head is down. The positioning is going to be set up such that if you're here, you're going to die to Cauterize from Nidhogg. You cannot be in front of these red markers. If you're beyond this imaginary line that cuts through the red markers, you're gonna die. You're gonna die to Cauterize from Nidhogg. That's the first step. Now, one of Frestfelger's wings are gonna glow. So if his from our POV, if the wing on the left or his wing on his right, if this wing starts glowing, it's gonna cleave this half of the room. So here's cauterized, as I'm highlighting, and then this is Hallowed Wing from Pressfelger. So that means this quadrant that I'm circling is safe. And this is the quadrant we're gonna have to use to resolve um, the baits properly. With so you're using for Hollowed Wing, you're using the blue markers. Once again, if you're over the imaginary line on the side of the wing glowing, you're gonna die to Hollowed Wing. So knowing this information with these quadrants unsafe, and it's party far, tanks close. The tanks are gonna have to position such that there's a tank here biasing towards the middle at the intersection of the two at the intersection of the red and blue markers. And then there's another tank ever so, far away enough that when those plumes go off, there's minimal overlap on the plumes that will kill to avoid killing the tanks and avoid killing the party. That's what's going on right now. And right now, actually, Pressfogger lifted its head, so it's party close, tanks far, and from our POV, the wing on the left is going to cleave. So what this means, with that information I shared, the tanks, as you can see, the Dark Knight here, off screen, is gonna move away from the party, and the gunbreaker right here is gonna have to move away from the party too on the opposite side of the map. The party is gonna need to make sure that they're behind the halfway point of this red marker, and they have to make sure they're, not on the side of the wing that's gonna cleave the other half of the map. So that's the position and that has to happen in order for us to do this correctly. So the gunbreaker, the Dark Knight are moving away. Right now we're trying to get some uptime on these dragons. And as you can see here, the red mage is definitely cutting it close. But the red mage knows the positioning. The red mage knows as long as they're not crossing the halfway point of the red marker, they're gonna dodge cauterized from Nidhogg that's gonna cleave down this side. But it is a very real thing where you don't want to greed the cast because the sequence of casts going off is the wings the wing from Hressoger is gonna cleave first, and a split second later, as you can see here with cauterized is gonna cleave uh immediately after. You need to be very mindful for that. So there goes the first cleave, and then instantly the second cleave. People are positioned, and those AoE baits that the tanks bait are pretty big too, as you can see here. Behind us, the tanks baited their puddles and their mastiff. If we go on the large PO and the wide POV, once this gets going, okay. So looking at it, okay, that's Akh Afah. Cool. So Nidhogg, once again, jumps away. You figure out where Nidhogg is, and then figure out what Pressfelger's doing. Pressfelger is telegraphing party close tanks far because his head is craning up. And then if we look at the wide shot for the positioning, let's see. The tanks are going far. The party is close. What we're looking for is the size of those tank busters going off. They're massive. Like they don't give you a lot of leeway. And even for the tanks, like they have to be careful with their positioning so that they don't overlap too much and kill each other. And then the party's over here. So we successfully completed Hallowed Wing 1. Immediately after completing the first Halloween, we facilitate the first Vow Pass. There's not a lot of time after that initial that sequence of mechanics. So we have to facilitate the Vow Pass. the ninja is going to pass the vow to T1, which is the gunbreaker. And so what you're gonna see here is as soon as the vow expires, it's gonna give off an AoE and it's gonna pass onto the gunbreaker right now. Uh, the ninja, upon successfully passing the vow, uh, will get a debuff that says you cannot receive the vow again for another 2 minutes. And T1 now is in possession of the vow, so T1 is going to start taking dot damage uh from the vow. Nidhogg is going to return, and Nidhogg is going to start casting raw flames. And I think I'll end the video here because raw flames is its own sequence. The only other note I have for this beginning sequence of the 2-minute Wyrmsbreath I and Akh Afah I is when we enter Akh Afah, it's good practice as a healer to make sure you throw something on the DPS that's holding the vow. The reason being is because you don't want to risk a scenario where we're close to death because somebody missed the mitigation. And because we're close to death, in this example, the ninja's at risk of being close to death, and the dot from the vow ticks the ninja enough to kill them, and then that wipes the run. We're dead. So again, it's good practice as a healer to make sure you throw something on the ninja in order to guarantee that they're gonna survive the stack damage and won't have issues. So typically me on white mage or me on shield healer, I will throw like divine benison or I'll throw Haima. I'll give them something. So as you can see here, as white mage, I threw Aqua Veil on the ninja because they're holding the vow before the Akh Afah finishes, just to guarantee that this ninja is going to be nice and healthy, to avoid any nasty scenarios. Because as you can see here, uh, they're fairly healthy. All our mitigations were on schedule, but there have been cases where somebody somebody misses a mitigation and the party's basically nearly dead. So that's Akh Afah. A note for the shield healer. So for shield healer, what you need to do is you're going to dot both dragons at the very start. So dot 1, dot 2, and immediately after doing your second dot, you're gonna throw down Sacred Soil or throw out Caracal. You need to do it in this sequence in order to guarantee that Sacred Soil or Caracal is going to return in time to catch Akh Afah. Because the risk of you doing so is um, we need the tools. We need to make sure that we're healthy, shielded, and have Soil or Caracal to avoid dying to damage. So Soil is out right now, and you're gonna see later in the poll when we go into Akh Afah I, pay attention to the Sacred Soil going out. We're halfway through the cast bar. Sacred Soil and Caracal come back right about now, just when the cast is about done. So Soil is out. That's not, it's not a lot of time, right? Right about here, just as the cast is finishing, Sacred Soil is coming back in time to catch the snapshot for Akh Afah. I cannot stress this enough as the shield healer. You do dot immediately at the start of P6 and immediately throw down your Sacred Soil or your Caracal. If you delay a GCD, there's a very high chance you're gonna miss the timing for Akh Afah I, and then you start risking people dying to damage for that. But that's effectively it for at least for this segment of P6. Once again, head up, party close, tank far, head down, tanks close, party far. That's usually the call. And then for the next video, I'm going to go over raw flames, just strictly raw flames, Akh Afah II and Hallowed Wing II. And then on the final video, I'll go over the 2-minute window going into Wyrmsbreath II, into Cauterized, and to transition for P7. But for the time being, that's all there is to P6. It's a big study check. The solo sim is very helpful. I highly recommend it, especially for the tanks, to use it to study, because there's also positioning cues for the tanks. So the last thing I'll go over, um, for at least the segment that we looked at today for the video, is the tank POV. In this POV, I am tank 1 on Paladin. We're going into we just defeated meteors in Death of the Heavens, and we're going into the tank buster. We see a raid wide right here. The tank buster is gonna go off on Nyreen, who's the Dark Knight. So she's gonna invul. And right now we're just seeing the buster. We had some issues. We had some death, so we are behind on damage, but we're gonna meet the check regardless. And then for safety, I just voked off of Nyreen to take Thornton off of her, just so that the healers weren't too stressed. So as tank 1 and as a tank, what I'm doing is I'm just positioning in the center just to get ready to hit my respective dragon. So my dragon is Nidhogg. You'll see me focus only on Nidhogg for the most part. So we're hitting. We're going into Wyrmsbreath 1. So I'm just pre-positioning. Wyrmsbreath 1 is 1, so immediately I scan both dragons and I see, okay, Nyreen's gonna take a buster. Because I scan the dragons, I see Nidhogg's mouth is gonna glow. So it's like, okay, Nidhogg, Breastfoger's not glowing, Nyreen's taking a buster. So for my safety, and the positioning for the tanks when one of the tanks is taking a buster, is both tanks will usually position in this little triangle. So the border of this circle and the edge of the respective marker for your side forms a little pocket for you as a tank to sit in, and you'll be safe. Nyreen is gonna explode off screen, and the blast radius of her taking the plume is gonna come just close enough to me. So as a tank, just use this little pocket right here, and you'll be perfectly safe. When we're hanging north side for Wyrmsbreath too. So Nyreen's taking her buster. The only other note I have, at least for Paladin in this POV, is I'm also timing my mitigation. So what I'm doing is when the cast for Wyrmsbreath 1 approaches the B in Wyrmsbreath, this is approximately where I'm gonna pop my 30% mitigation if I'm taking the buster. Whether I'm taking the buster or not, I pop my 30% regardless, because that's my schedule up for the rest of the mitigations in P6. I do not recommend you do this, but I like to do this just because I have a very good understanding of how much damage is going out. So I just pop my 30% on schedule, whether I'm taking a buster or not, so that I set the rest of my mitigations up for all of P6. Because the way Wyrmsbreath 1 is set up, later in P6, when Wyrmsbreath 2 comes up, approximately the same time is when my 30% is gonna come up. So it puts me in a position where it forces me to have my 30% on cooldown if I didn't need it, but it guarantees that I'm gonna have my 30% up to take both Wyrmsbreath 2 and Cauterized, because Cauterized is very, very scary for the tanks. Cauterized is gonna have to get resolved as a wild charge near the end of P6 going into an raid sequence. So once again, Wyrmsbreath 1 is casting. I'm going into my little safety pocket. I'm just timing my mitigation. I pop my 30 right there once I see it clear the B and breath. And then Nyreen explodes. We go into position. As tank 1, my responsibility is to reprisal the Akh Afah. So As tank 1, I'm biasing north side for Akh Afah. I pop my reprisal, I catch both dragons. We have our mitigations. And as you can see here too, stressing about the Caracal and the Sacred Soil. Shield Healer, like, you need to make sure you dot, and immediately soil or Caracal. If you delay, you're gonna come too late and you start risk killing the party. See, like, the Caracal goes out, but the cast is already over for Akh Afah. That's very dangerous. That could kill people if you're too late. And as you can see here, we actually missed the snapshot. The Caracal was too late. I believe it was too late. Yeah, here's Caracal, and then immediately after Caracal, the Akh Afah calculated already. And because we were late on that Caracal, look at Kier's health. I'm gonna erase this. Look at Kier's health. Kier has the Vow, so Kier's going to take dot damage, and Kier currently has 5,000 health. I think, if I remember correctly, the dot ticks for about 3.6k, but there's a floor and a ceiling. Kier is at high risk of dying to dot, and then that wipes the run. So once again, do not delay as shield healer. At the start, you dot, and immediately put Caracal. And the Caracal should have gone out by now. It's already running off schedule. Yeah, once again on tank POV, look at the dragons, position in the pocket, pop your mitigation. Your 30%'s enough. This is a baby buster. As tank, as soon as Nidhogg goes away, I start hitting Pressfelger. And so we go into Akh Afah, tank 1 reprisals. Bam. Okay. Then we go into Hallowed Wing I. So it party far tanks close, party far tanks close. Nyreen and I are kind of figuring out our positioning. Nyreen at the beginning had asked me if she can be in the center. Unfortunately, because I lost track of my positioning, I bullied Nyreen off of her spot. So I'm taking her spot. So what you'll often encounter in PF2 on tank POV is the tanks will agree ahead of time, like which tank is in the center, which tank is far. We we want Nyreen close because she doesn't have a ranged ability that does high damage. I do because I'm a paladin and I can Holy Spirit. So unfortunately, I was trolling Nyreen in this instance, but the tanks are positioned correctly, so tanks close, party far. Boom, we explode. I messed up my mitigation. I was supposed to pop my 20% going into Hallowed Wing 1. And then as you can see here, I almost dropped dead to damage. And then we're facilitating the Vow Pass. As tank 1, I receive the first pass of the Vow. And then we go into Raw Flame. But that's all there is to it. And this is the tank POV. Once again, at the next video, I'm going to go over Raw Flames into Akh Afah 2 into Hallowed Wing 2. And then the final video will go through the final set mechanic. But that's pretty much it.